Hello everybody and welcome to my short tutorial on using map in JavaScript. We are going to be processing some JSON data. Now there are some starter files out there you can feel free to use. Eventually in part 2 and 3 of this tutorial we're going to look into using XHR and fetch to get these pet names into our HTML page and print out a list of dog and cat names. There's two different types. But I really kind of wanted to start a little bit differently. We're actually just going to start by putting the names into variables, into JSON variables. So we can really kind of spend a little bit of time looking at map and join, using those in JavaScript to kind of replace the traditional kind of for loop you've seen. Now you'll see a lot of these used in React and various frameworks, and I felt like they always have a little bit of a mystery to them, and I'm hoping this video can kind of break down some of the mystery, and I feel it really helps to actually go through and kind of painfully look at every little step of what it's doing. Now there's plenty of tutorials out there, and I'm not saying mine is going to be the best, but sometimes I find when you look at documentation like this, they start a little bit complicated, they're a little bit overwhelming, and I really want to break this down in its simplest sense. Now, this tutorial is assuming you have some web development knowledge, and like I said, we're starting things a little bit backwards, so if you want to kind of skip ahead, you're welcome to check out the XHR or the fetch parts. But let me take a look at the starter code I've provided, which you can go ahead and download, and I would open that up as a folder in Visual Studio Code. We're not going to be using this data right away, we'll use that in the next part, but we have this index.html. I'm going to quickly go over it. Once again, if you have questions on some of this earlier stuff, you'll probably want to do a little bit more reading on this. But I've set up 3 buttons, and I've done that so that we can kind of start with a variable approach, then implement XHR, then implement fetch, but still kind of retain our code from the previous examples and not have to just overwrite our existing function. So it might look a little overwhelming, but I don't think it's too bad. We have 3 buttons here. We have an output where we're going to place our pet names once we've processed them, our dog and cat names, as you could kind of see from our data here. I have created just a constant to house these. Now this is JavaScript object notation. It's going to behave a little bit like an associative array or a dictionary if you're used to Python. But it's going to behave really just kind of like your traditional array or list. It's nothing scary, but we have dog names with a array of names, and we have cat names, the cat names key, also with a list of items in it as well. And we are going to kind of use this as our starting point. Like I said, a little bit backwards. We'll then later on get these fed in with JSON, but I want to really focus on this initial topic of like, how do I make the transition from using these kind of traditional for loops, right? I've maybe been a programmer for a long time. I'm getting back into JavaScript and I'm seeing all these crazy things. How do I kind of demystify that? That's the main topic of this video. And then we'll kind of look into XHR and fetch as sort of a bonus later on. So what I've done here is this is our kind of JSON, and I've put them into individual arrays here. We have a cat names and a dog names. And this is the function that is going to be called when you click this far most left button. So hopefully you guys have the sample code open now if you don't pause the video. And just to make sure we have everything in here, I'm going to do a console.log, and we're going to log out the cat names, which is kind of just going to be like an array of names here. So when I refresh and click load data, you will see here are all of our cat names. Okay. Now I might not always use the most appropriate terms. If you're a hardcore software engineer, I might say array when I mean list, or object when I mean something else, but I'm just trying to kind of explain this in a sense that I hope people understand. But if you disagree, I apologize. Please don't give me any bad feedback on this, but that's just kind of my approach to teaching these topics. All right, so let's kind of get started here. We're printing out all the names, and I don't want them to print here. I want them to print in the output, which I've added here. And I've already kind of created a selector for the output, so we don't have to redo our query selector. When we're ready to do something, we can just do output dot inner HTML equals hello world. Okay, and later on maybe in tutorial 2 or 3 I'll show you a more systematic way of not doing in our HTML, but we got to start somewhere. There's a lot to cover, and you can kind of see when I click the button now, hello world is being fired. Alright, so method 1, the old school way. We're just going to kind of write an old school traditional for loop here to go through these. Let's get started with this. So we're just going to do our for. Let me zoom in a tad here for you guys. And we're going to say, you know, let I equals 0. We want to say for, well, I is less than the cat name length, okay? It's always different in every programming language, right? Sometimes it's a property, sometimes it's a method, like in Python. We're going to do cat names.length. So I'm going to focus on cat names for now, and then at the end we'll put it all together. And then we can go ahead and do I++, right? Hopefully this looks pretty familiar to most programmers. And what we are going to do here is I'm going to say output.inner HTML, and I'm going to kind of do a plus equals here, nothing fancy. I am going to use these kind of template strings here. If you need to kind of a refresher on what these are, I would check that out first. But as opposed to kind of doing this plus this and having to concatenate the string, I'm going to use these. You'll see these used a lot more commonly now. And we're going to say div. We're going to put in our div. With these template literals, right, I can now just kind of inject my variable right in here with a $sign. This makes it nice because now I can do a quote and not screw everything up. And we are going to put in the cat names, and we are going to say cat name I. And let's just give this a quick shot to see if it works. Hopefully this part works. And I'm using live server here, so it's immediately refreshing. For now, you can just kind of open it in your Finder in a browser and it'll work, but when we get to the XHR part, you'll probably want to have this live server enabled, so when I right click here, I can just kind of go to open in live server. So if you're not sure how to do that, just Google how to open live server, Visual Studio Code, a million tutorials on that. And here is our list. But we wanted to put a number in front of it, but that's pretty easy to do with these template strings. We can simply just do another variable, and we want to say I, but in this case I want to do I plus 1. And let's give this a shot here, and here is our list. So feel free to pause if I'm going too quick, or speed up the video if I'm going too slow. Nothing crazy here. That's our kind of baseline. Let's go to method 2, another type of for loop. This is pretty useful, especially if you're getting into development and you might have to do a technical interview. They might ask you various different methods of doing a for loop, and there's a lot of them. Maybe you don't have everyone memorized, but at least you can sort of say, okay, I know of this one, you know, I'm going to do it this way, but I know there's another way. But sometimes they will ask you to do a specific type of for loop, you never know. And I'm going to kind of say for, and we're going to say let name. This is kind of like a for each. We're going to say let name of cat names. So now each cat name is going to be kind of assigned to this variable name. So if I did a console.log of name, I'm going quickly here because this is hopefully a review. You can see here all of our cat names, but we want to actually add it to the output, right? So to add it to the output, we can kind of do this and just print out the name. But let's put it inside a div real quick. Here we go. Here's our div. And let's see what's going on here. Okay, let's put it inside the template string. Let's not forget that. And there we go. And here we go. Here's names. But what do we do now? We don't have like an I to keep track of this anymore. So this is leading somewhere. This is leading to why we are going to be using map in a minute here. So what I want to do instead is maybe not the best approach in the world, but I'm going to create like an HTML variable, and I'm going to open up the OL here, and at the very end I'm going to close the OL plus equals OL, right? We want an unordered list. I'm sorry, ordered list, excuse me. And now we are going to change these to be LI, LI, okay? But I want to kind of build up this HTML string. So instead I'm going to kind of do HTML plus equals li name li, we have our HTML string built. So then at the very end, we can do our output.inner HTML equals HTML. Let's give this a shot here and see if it works. There we go. So this is a little slicker, right? We're doing a list instead of kind of this hacked together method. And this is getting us towards, doing this all in one line. That's what I should have maybe led with. We're going to eventually replace all this code with just one cool map and join command. All right, let's move on to method 4. I'm just going to comment this out. Remember, in Visual Studio, you can do command / or control / to comment this out. Let's work towards using this map. Now, I'd like to start simple. We're finally getting into what I promised we'd talk about is this map. So hopefully I didn't bore everybody to death in the first 10 minutes, or you could have skipped that part. I'm going to just try doing something. Let's go ahead and do cat names.map. All right. So map seems mysterious. All this thing is really kind of doing is taking a function and saying, like, for each cat name, call a function. So if I, for example, created a function called, process name, and I do a console.log, okay, well, what am I logging out? Well, I want to log out the individual name, which means I need to pass it in as a parameter here, okay? Now, I'm going to say, for each kind of entry in this array, go ahead and call process name. Now notice I don't have any parentheses here. I don't have to do like this. I can just simply say process name, and it's going to kind of automatically put each individual name as the first parameter. I could call this whatever I want. I called it name because it made sense. And now it's going to console.log them out. All right, so I might just do a console.log here and not actually get this working. We'll see. Let's save this, and we're going to do load JSON, and you will see, okay, here we go. So if you wanted to actually put this in the HTML, you could basically follow this same exact pattern here and just output the opening and the closing above here. But I think that kind of gives you the idea. I want to kind of keep this moving. I want you to just basically see how simple map is. All it's doing is just calling this function for each entry. All right. So let's move on to step 4. Now we're going to kind of start off similar. We're going to say this cat names.map, but instead of calling an external function, I'm going to do one of these kind of anonymous container functions here. We're going to say like put the function right here, like it's a little self-contained function. Now you might see this syntax a lot where people do this, and just to prove this works, we'll do a console.log, and I will just say, hello. We'll worry about getting the data in a second, but I think we should be seeing hello 20 times if all goes as planned, and sure enough you see hello 20. Okay, so we are getting somewhere. Let's see. Now we're going to do kind of a more modern syntax because we want to kind of do this latest and greatest mapped functionality you might see in React and a lot of cool frameworks. We're going to use an arrow function. All right, so it's going to look more like this, our little self-contained function, as opposed to the one I just did. It's going to look like this. You might be thinking, well, what the heck is this? Real quick, look up arrow functions if you want more clarification on this. But essentially, recall if we had a function called, do something, and it took in a thing, we could rewrite this as an arrow function like this, because a constant do something. We put the parameters now in after the equal sign, so we say thing, and then we do this little equal sign arrow, and we put the body of the function inside of here. So we could then do our thing. Whatever we're going to do, we do in here. All right. So kind of the same thing. I'll talk about maybe in another video the advantages of arrow functions. Essentially, it has to do with like keeping track of this. I don't want to get sidetracked today, but we're going to kind of do this arrow function, and as opposed to, like I said, as opposed to this sort of method like this. Right? We don't need an external function. We can kind of do it all right in here, but we are going to do instead this syntax. Now we're going to say name because we need some way to reference each of the names, and so that's kind of going to be a parameter. And now here is the body of our function, so we're going to do a console.log, and we're going to console.log each name. Let's just make sure this works before we do anything else. And once again, here are all of our names. Good. Okay. Now, a couple things I didn't talk about with arrow functions either. They can be simplified even more, and we'll cross that bridge in a second. But for now, let's kind of focus maybe, on just getting this little piece of the puzzle working. And then I will kind of incorporate some more things to condense this fully into one line. So for now, like what I'll just do is I'll kind of do it the way we were doing it before. I will kind of keep building up this HTML variable. Now, since we commented this out above, I want to redo this. I'm going to say HTML equals OL. And now each time this little self-contained function gets called, we're going to plus equal, and we're going to basically add the li. And I suppose I will stick with the theme here of using this kind of template string here. So we're going to put in this li and our closing li. And we are going to then put the individual name inside of here. All right. So sometimes this might help you, right? If this starts to get a little overwhelming, right? It's nice that it's in one line. You'll probably see this a lot in your development experience. What you can also do, if you want, you can make this multiple lines, just like a regular plain old function. Okay. This is the same thing. So yes, we will work to get this into one line. That's not to say you can't break it into multiple lines, though, later on. So that would be the same as doing that. Okay, if that helps you kind of see it and visualize it better, then we're going to do our plus equals closing OL. And finally, we are going to do our output.inner HTML equals HTML. And yes, I probably could have done this all in one line, but it's okay. I want to present a lot of ideas, but I don't want to present like 10,000 different ideas. 1 second here, output.inner HTML. We need our little typo here. There we go. Just had to fix that closing argument. And now, here we go. Kind of back to where we were before. But how are we going to truly get this to be one line? And we've seen this join thing around as well. So let's keep moving here and try some other approaches here. So I'm calling this my interlude method because we need to look at a few more things to figure out how we can condense this and make this work with the join eventually, to do this this very kind of modern, nice way. Alright, so let me just point out one quick thing for my little segue here. If I just had a function called add5 and I took in a number and I just did num plus 5 and I returned this plus 5. Okay, we can do this in a condensed format with an arrow function. So this, if you see this and you're wondering if this looks mysterious, it's really not super confusing once you kind of know what's going on. We're going to say constant 5. We can actually just do num. We don't need to surround it in these parentheses because we only have one parameter. And once again, instead now of doing my brackets like I did before, because I'm only kind of returning one thing here, I'm not doing a ton of stuff up here, I can just simply do num plus 5. And these two functions are going to do the same thing. This one's just a little bit more condensed. So I think having this bit of knowledge, we're going to kind of apply this going forward. Okay. Now, let me comment this out here. And let's continue working on this piece here. Okay. So if you want, you can take your existing catnames.map, or you can retype this down here in my little interlude section here. Let's get this out of here and move this into here. Alright, now first off, as I just showed you, like I said, we can get rid of this. We don't need this anymore. But I want to kind of like clean this up a little bit. I don't need these curly brackets anymore if I can kind of consolidate this piece into just a single return. Okay, but that's going to have to change my approach a little bit. What we're going to do instead is we are going to essentially have map build us a new array, but it's going to be an array of all of these names surrounded in the li element. So let's adjust our code a little bit here. in the sense that I'm going to set this to a new array so I can get rid of these, okay? Because if I simply get rid of these now, it's not really returning a single thing, okay? So what I'm going to do instead, and maybe I will just rewrite this because I don't want to confuse you guys too much. We're going to kind of say let names array. I should probably say, let's say cat names array. Cat names array. And we're going to set this equal to cat names dot map, okay? And we're going to do our little arrow function. We can get rid of those parentheses, and we want to have a single return. And our single return is going to be our li for each individual name, okay? And inside of here is our individual name, okay? So I was able to kind of get rid of this by these extra curly brackets by just making this that simple one-line return, but I need to keep track of each of those names, so I'm kind of assigning it to this cat names array here. Okay, this is where the voodoo I think happens a little bit, but I hope I explained that well enough. And let's just do a console.log of the cat names array to make sure that this is in fact what I am expecting here. And you will see, sure enough, here is my array, okay? But look at it now. We now have this array with the name surrounded by the li. So did that kind of make sense? We just returned each li through this, this call here, through this function, and we assign it to the cat names array, which essentially kind of does what seems a little bit like magic, but I hope you guys are kind of understanding it. Now we have this array with all of our li elements. So we kind of have one last thing to do. And, you know, if you've been following along, I hope I haven't confused you, but we're almost there. I promise we are almost there. We need to essentially now convert this back to a string, okay? And we need to surround it in the OL elements. Now, yes, you're probably thinking, okay, we could do another for loop, and we could go through that cat names array and do the same exact thing we did, but we're going to explore the join to do this instead, okay? So for example, we are going to use this join. The join method creates and returns a new string by concatenating all of the elements in the array, separated by commas or whatever you specify, okay? So let's take this array, which we have here, and actually before I get to the next method, let's just try this. Let's do .join, okay? And let's just leave it empty, okay? So it's gonna kind of almost explode that array, put them all together with nothing in between it. And I'll do another demonstration of this in a second. You will see here is my new list that has been joined together, okay? So in case you missed that, let's just, for the heck of it, do a comma. Now obviously this would produce invalid HTML, but when I do this, you can kind of see, okay, here's a name, here's a name, here's a name, and they're all separated by comma. So if you think about it, this basically did exactly what I need to do. It put all of the names in one string, okay? But I still have a lot of lines going on here. Let's finish this off. Let's get this done like I promised in pretty much one line of code. We're going to say let HTML equals, we're going to kind of start off the same way, cat names dot map, okay? The big difference is we're going to add this join at the end. That's kind of giving it away there. Let's go ahead. I'll just retype this all. I apologize if I'm doing too much typing here, but we're going to do this one last time. We're going to do our li. We're going to do our closing li, and we are going to put in our individual name here. Okay, and then we are going to simply join it together with an empty string here, so there's no space. So now, if I were to console.log out the HTML, and let's comment this out as well. you will see we now have all of our HTML in this nice string, and look at that, we were able to do it all in one line. So we kind of did it, we're kind of there. So at this point, it's up to you how you wanted to join the final OL into the picture, right? You could do OL like this, our more traditional method, without using the template literal. And then what we would want to do is do our output.inner HTML equals HTML. And finally, after all that, you can kind of hopefully see how all this has came together. We've got that one nice piece working here in one line. When you see this line, not knowing what we knew when we went into this video, it might have been overwhelming, but I hope I was able to break down all the pieces and help demystify this a little bit. I'll just paste in one alternate approach here as well. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to type this all out, but you can feel free to pause the video here. Let's go ahead and do the cat and dog names here. And I'm going to simply paste this in and talk about it. So we're saying same thing we did up here. We're saying dog HTML, cat HTML. Now I've just changed it ever so slightly. Instead of saying word, I shortened this to W just to make it a bit shorter, but same exact thing you're seeing up here, except we're doing cat names and dog names. I swapped that. And the other big difference here is that we are using the template literal for the outside of the entire kind of piece here, right? It's essentially very similar, to what we were doing here. So pick whatever approach you kind of like here. This is a little bit overwhelming because we have a kind of these nested almost pieces here, but they're both essentially doing the same thing. So we have our dog name, cat name in one line each. And then once again, in the interest of time here, feel free to pause the video. I'm going a little bit over the time I wanted to. This is our overall HTML now. This is where it really starts coming handy using these template strings. Okay, here's our header for dog names, here's our header for cat names, and then we print out the respective HTML. And then we can simply do output.inner HTML equals HTML. And here we go. Dog names, cat names. So I hope that helped demystify this a little bit. In the next series of videos, which I will put a different link out, we will kind of do what normally we would have done first, but I really wanted to focus on this topic because I found it more interesting. But we will, instead of feeding this in from the variable here, we will feed it in from a JSON document. A very simple one that matches our structure similarly to kind of keep things simple. But then I will explore a slightly more complex JSON structure, which is more traditional from what you will see when you are interacting with web services, right? Most of the time, like if I'm fetching somebody's profile, there's going to be a lot of attributes associated with. And you can see this one, we're a little bit limited in what we can do. So stay tuned for the next part of the video, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.